emerging market flows? Those will, of course, be the big questions here in Davos. Welcome back. You're watching our continuing coverage here from Davos 2025. We're talking about a Trump 2.0 era and what that could mean for different sectors, including the healthcare sector. Joining me now to understand how the vaccine industry is bracing itself for a Trump regime is Adar Poonawalla. Adar, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Trump and the implications for your industry. You just met with the head of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. What are you bracing yourselves for?
Firstly, it's a pleasure to talk to you again about this. You know, we'll just have to wait and see for the policies that the US sets out. But from what we've understood is that, you know, the vaccine industry in providing vaccines to the US is going to take a little bit of time because the new person in charge, Mr. Kennedy, as we've been told, wants a lot of scientific-based data before they approve and license vaccines. So let's see how that goes. We're working with AI tools to fast-track clinical trials.
Anyway, isn't it?
Yes, so, but they want to see more data, more information, all of that. So let's see how that goes. As far as Gavi is concerned, you know, there's a replenishment coming back where they need to raise $8 to $10 billion. To be able to procure all these vaccines. We've substantially brought down prices from $10 to $4 for the malaria vaccine, for example, and that's going to save hundreds of millions of dollars and hopefully save a lot of lives on the continent of Africa. We want to, invest and develop new vaccines also, like, we're launching the HPV vaccine in India next year for the government programs. This year, and then, export some of that next year. So you've got a lot of things in the pipeline, and things are looking good.
Well, things are looking good in your words, but let's talk about the malaria vaccine, because that was the big breakthrough in 2024 when you started your dispatches. What's the outlook now in terms of the uptake of the malaria vaccine, the capacity for the same as well?
Well, we're investing to build a capacity of around 100 million doses annually. Right now, it's only about 25 to 30 million doses a year because that's what the countries in Africa can take. But as the funding gets into place and the countries get ready from a programmatic point of view to take the vaccines, we're hoping to see a large uptake. But what concerns me is the development of vaccines in India. Our ability to innovate and make our own vaccines, because we want to make in India, we want to invest in India. But I'll just share a fun fact that, well, it's actually a sad fact that the entire vaccine industry, my company included, struggles to cross even $1 billion worth of profits annually. And that's nowhere near enough to be able to develop our own vaccines and molecules. For example, we've had to partner with others to get the dengue vaccine, the chikungunya vaccine, the monkeypox vaccine, all of these we'll launch in the next 1 or 2 years. So, I think the government has to relook at and relax some of the price controls that we have. We're not talking about removing price controls because we want the public at large to be able to access, affordable healthcare. But today we're selling vaccines at less than the price of roadside shoes and other consumables and commodities that, it needs to be relooked at, because only then can we make enough profits to reinvest and innovate and make our own vaccines.
So you're saying the profits that you're making today are not enough for you to be able to invest in R&D?
No, not at all. If you just look at some of the companies here, Pfizer, GSK, Sanofi's, if we want to have those companies and that size of a company, for Indian, they make, tens of billions of dollars worth of profits, so that, each of these drugs and vaccines take, years to develop and hundreds of millions of dollars. Take the malaria vaccine, it was all self-funded, we funded it ourselves, but it took us 5-6 years. We could have done that much faster. As I said, the whole vaccine industry combined makes just $1 billion worth of profits. You look at all the other industries in India, they're flourishing. IT industry, the auto industry, steel, you name it, everything, because they don't have restrictions. If the biotech industry got what the IT industry got 10, 15 years ago, every biotech company would make $1 billion a quarter, you know, and that's the kind of money and capital you need.
But we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about saving people's lives, so it has to be something that, you know, a common person can access.
Absolutely. So when I say relook at it, I'm not talking about removing price controls. I'm talking about relaxing price controls. So if we're talking about a vaccine which is being sold at 100 rupees or 200 rupees, right now the MRPs are being reduced. And someone needs to look at it. Instead of being increased by, you know, 10 or 20% or 30%, you know, and these are vaccines that you take, for example, that protect you for, say, 10 years. Today you buy a painkiller, or you buy any medicines, or you buy other consumables, or you spend on any sector that you look at in India. What is a few hundred rupees? So we're still talking about keeping it affordable. It's just got to balance it out so that, you know, the industry can grow, also create more jobs, more investment, and most importantly, you know, you look at even the COVID times. We had to go to AstraZeneca and Oxford to partner with a vaccine there. For the chikungunya vaccine, we've partnered with Valneva. For the monkeypox vaccine, we've partnered with Bavarian Nordic, and so on and so forth. So yes, the partnership model works, but if you want to develop and make in India everything from scratch, you need that kind of capital to be able to do that. So it's the chicken or the egg, and that needs to be balanced. I'm not saying, you know, remove price controls so that it becomes unaffordable. Absolutely not. But that's what I think we need to have a discussion and debate.
So you're saying that it's capital that's constraining you from being more innovative?
Absolutely. Look at the talent we have in India. You've got some of the most hard-working people, talented people, qualified people. You know, they may not want to work 70 hours a week, but we work even, you know, through Saturdays in our manufacturing. So, you know, you've got everything going for us. We just need the capital.
Well, you waded into the 70-hour and the 90-hour debate, didn't you? Tweeting a picture of yourself and claiming that your wife is the one staring at you on a Sunday.
Well, I don't know how much she actually stares at me on a Sunday, but the point was made in lighter vein to just articulate that, you know, there are things outside of work that one needs to be able to enjoy, experience. Even if you're talking about, you know, if you're a senior level manager or a CEO, you need to be able to, you know, network with people outside of the office, whether it's to raise capital, access to technology, know what's going on. How can you do that if you work, you know, 70 hours a week? So I think, you know, whoever said that also meant it that it was just meant in zest that you must work hard. There's no substitute for hard work. I totally agree with that. But it needs to be balanced.
Well, what is the balance that you go for at Serum? I mean, how do you look at this issue of how much and, you know, balancing between what you require in terms of your personal growth and personal time off with the needs of the organization?
Well, I dedicate 70 to 80% of my time on Serum Institute, and we have other businesses and investments like Poonawalla Fincorp, and, you know, we have a lot of private equity investments that I manage as well. But as far as the workforce at Serum, you know, we have an 8-hour shift, which itself is quite grueling. If you're talking about physical labor, you know, for most part of the activities, I think 8 hours is very reasonable and fair. We have, you know, multiple shifts. So we start at 7:30 in the morning, that shift gets over at 4, and then the next shift takes over. So we don't work more than 8 hours per shift, because I think that's you know, the human limit, because after that you see productivity also going down, which is also very important.
Yes, it is very, very important. But you talked about some of the other businesses. Let's talk about Poonawalla Fincorp, and it's been a difficult time. I mean, we've seen that being reflected in the numbers as well. Also a fair degree of churn of people. What's going on there?
Well, you know, ever since we took over Magma, there was a huge change in churn at that time, turning around the product portfolio, the people at that time as well. We got into retail lending and certain products which was, they were focused more on the unsecured space. Now, given the sort of delinquencies we're seeing across the board in the unsecured lending, we felt that we should focus more on secured lending, LAP, housing, other sort of secured lending. And that's where we felt it was time for a seasoned team, which we managed to get over from HDFC partly and from other banks and NBFCs, putting together a really good set of senior leadership, where we're now going into many other verticals, gold loans, LAP, and so many other things. And perhaps even using AI for customer service, for even underwriting, for lending, and so many other things. So that's an exciting part also, where I think some efficiencies can come in. Now we're on a good footing going forward.
When do you expect a turnaround?
No, the turnaround has already begun. So, what I would say is that with the new team in place and the new investments, the OPEX, which is there to incubate some of these new businesses, I think you're going to see a huge turnaround in the figures in the coming year. This financial year obviously is not going to be what it was last year, because we've written off a lot of the old legacy books. So we wanted to clean it up rather than having an overhang.
Is the cleanup done?
It's done. We've written it off in terms of, providing for it and making the provisions. We've improved our collections. We're at 85% collections, so it's significantly higher than what it was. We've got a AUM now of 30,000 crores, and we're hoping to grow at 35-40%. That's the guidance we've given. And
you're sticking with that?
Yeah, and I think we can easily reach a lakh crores in the next 5 to 7 years of AUM, and we want to do it very sensibly, carefully, and again more on the secured side, and have like a 60-40 mix of secured and unsecured lending.
The regulator has been fairly cautious on what's happening on the unsecured side. You also talked about the delinquencies and how you've seen that go up. But what are you seeing at this point in time in terms of consumption, in terms of growth? Do you see any signs of a pickup, or do you believe that it's still slow?
Well, the consumption has slowed down across the board, as we've seen. But what worries me is that in this sector, whether it's fintechs and other NBFCs or whoever else it is, we need to be careful on over lending and making it too easy for people to just borrow money. Because let's look at someone who's not understood or grasped the whole situation, where today you're seeing people borrowing. You have a loan, and then you pay off that loan by borrowing again from someone else. And I think that needs to be curtailed and watched. And the responsible players at least have a very strict limit. That look, if they've got a loan from someone else, then this is how much we're prepared to lend to them. I think if that discipline is maintained, that'll kind of reduce the delinquencies. And I think as people realize, and they've been investing a lot in the stock market, as we've seen. I think once that slows down a little bit, if at all, and there's been a lot of leveraging for that activity, let's see what happens. But right now, one needs to be quite careful and calibrated in the unsecured space. And RBI is absolutely correct in putting all these warning signs and measures. So we're complying to that and fully, are aligned to, their way of thinking on it.
So let me end then by asking you about the pipeline for 2025. You talked about malaria, chikungunya, monkeypox, the HPV vaccine. What will you prioritize in 2025? And more partnerships likely?
All of these vaccines. We've got the yellow fever vaccine as well. So it's all these nasty diseases you get from mosquitoes. I'm terrified of mosquitoes, so I've been attacking my firepower on all mosquito-borne diseases. So hopefully, that should have a serious impact. And HPV is something which is very important for girls and women, both in India and across the globe. So I'm going to focus on that. I think that's enough for the next 3-4 years to chew up, and so let's see.
And since you talked about the lack of capital, are you looking at raising funds for anything specific at this point?
Well, I keep churning my portfolio and investments in privately listed companies. We just signed a deal with TPG for selling off a stake in our glass vials and syringe business, the Adar Poonawalla business. We're talking to some people for our insurance business. We're talking about also taking 1 or 2 of our companies public, maybe in a year or two, like Wellness Forever, where we have an investment of and a stake of around 25%. So, after 5 years, I like to sort of try and churn the portfolio because an exit is very important also Otherwise, you sort of get stuck in with investments and you don't get the liquidity. So I like to just churn that portfolio. So
well, we hope that you churn what you need to churn effectively and continue to deliver on the vaccines and the pipeline that you have there, as well as turn things around at Poonawalla Fincorp. Many thanks, Adar, for joining us here on CNBC TV18. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this conversation, but there's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with more.